I will have some questions. How do you make this possible? You can't be alone. So how the administration is moving slowly but surely to this vision? How do you do this?
Yeah, I mean, part of it is actually to not move slowly but surely. Okay. Part of it is to move really, really fast. And at the end of the day, we've been very successful at this. I mean, this has been one of those things where change is oftentimes very hard to produce. When Barack Obama became president, there was an enormous amount of excitement. And I think a lot of people thought that they would wake up the day he woke up for the first time in the White House and everything was going to be changed. Unfortunately, that's not the way the world works. But in this area, this is actually an area where we've been very hard charging and where we've tried to make mistakes of commission rather than mistakes of omission. So the first thing is actually to not accept slow progress, but to push things out very aggressively and to not fear failure. Oftentimes government and oftentimes big companies are so afraid of failure that they don't allow for experimentation. Remember that slide about experimentation. The only way to achieve success is to try new things. When we raised $30 million through text messages, we didn't know if we were going to raise $30 million or $30. So part of it was to take big chances. A second thing is support from the top. I have a terrific team. There are wonderful young innovators, a lot of whom are not normal for government. You would see him and you would think, oh, he must work at a web design firm. Oh, that looks like a marketing executive. But they work at the State Department. All of that's fine so long as you have support at the top. And so one of the very important things is that Hillary Clinton has made this agenda her agenda. So she has been the champion of what she calls 21st century statecraft. And her own attitude is that she doesn't have to be the expert at all of the individual tools. She doesn't use Twitter. I don't know how much time she spends on social media personally, but she understands its importance. And so what she then does is support it. And if people do make mistakes, she protects them. Because what she recognizes and what she often cites is that more than half of the people on the planet are under 30 years old. And if you do things the old way, you're not going to reach those people who get information, share information, and synthesize information, who make up a majority of the 7 billion people on the planet under 30.
Thank you. Do you have any question from the audience? Olivier, tu as une question? I have a second question is, which countries are sensitive about this vision of e-diplomacy? So for the back, in the 2 years we did, I think you've been in Baghdad, you've been in several countries. Can you share about this?
Yeah, I mean, there are some countries that welcome this, and there are other countries who are less than thrilled about it. So, for example, we have an initiative that's rooted in internet freedom, where we believe that the internet isn't something that should be censored if what's being censored is peaceful political expression. So China, for example, has a completely different set of values for what it believes is appropriate content for the internet than what we do. So the Chinese, for example, have had a big problem with this. Iran, I mentioned. Obviously, the Iranians are extraordinarily antagonized by what the United States is doing in these digital spaces. They would argue that we are not being empowering, but that point in fact we're being overpowering. But one thing that's very interesting to me is to see people who started off against it, who then embrace these tools. So in Venezuela, for example, Hugo Chavez, the president of Venezuela, said at one point that Twitter is an instrument of revolution. And he condemned Twitter, and he condemned all of these American technologies. But Hugo Chavez now uses Twitter a lot. And apparently he's got like 30 people helping him use Twitter. So one of the things that's very interesting is to see people who at once were against it understand that it's inevitable, so they then choose to embrace it.
Thank you. One question.
Hello, I am Grégoire Beignet, French but working in Austria for the Austrian Institute of Technology. And I just wanted to ask you if you have a vision about the next 20 years. Because you are working in diplomacy for the States, are you optimistic about innovation, new technologies, or are you also maybe pessimistic about certain kind of subjects? So it would be interesting to hear. Thank you.
Yeah, so I am not a utopian about technology. I don't think you can just sprinkle the internet on a problem and everybody grows up to be healthy, wealthy, and wise. As the Secretary of State has said, technology can be used for good or for ill. It's like nuclear power. Nuclear power can be used to fuel a city or destroy a city, like steel. Steel can be used to build a hospital or a machete. So the technology itself is inanimate. It's value neutral. It's what people use it for that will determine whether it's being used for good or for ill. Now, with a 20-year perspective, I'm very, very optimistic. And the reason that I'm optimistic is to think about its promise, particularly in the developing world. So if you think about places that historically have lacked opportunity because they couldn't afford schools, they couldn't afford textbooks, they didn't have access to information. One of the reasons why I'm most optimistic is because as technology becomes increasingly mobile, as its cost goes down and as its power goes up, what that means is that we can get power in the hands of people who historically haven't had it, because information really is power. This is sort of the counter-narrative to something that Joseph Stalin said. Joseph Stalin said, ideas are more powerful than weapons. We don't give our enemies weapons, so why would we give them ideas? So playing out the opposite of that, the best way to work in a world that is focused on empowering rather than overpowering is to use these technology tools as a way of getting information and resources out. So I'm wildly optimistic.
We have another question from Inter.
Two questions for you, Alec. First is, when you look at the Chinese trying to control the media, how much does the part of E fit into the speech or the conversation between Hillary and her homologues in China or Iran, as part of the diplomatic conversation? And the second question relates to Barack Obama's Twitter. I have in front of me all the different handles of this heads of state. And all but two of them basically have, well, that's not true, three of them are nominative. So it's Harper, it's Rania, John Key, etc. Barack Obama, of course. And then in France and England, they've chosen to use the name of the location, Downing Street, Élysée. So on the first part of that is, how many people are actually doing the work? Because it's not actually truly nominative and therefore transparent. And how does Barack Obama know what's being said on his Twitter feed all the time? Because what I'm looking at is, how do you import that into business? Do you go with the corporate view, or do you really follow the nominative?
Yeah. So let me answer both of those questions. So the first question, just to refresh, was, to what degree are issues related to internet freedom actually part of the dialogue between, say, Hillary Clinton and the Chinese? It's always on the table. Most of these relationships that we have with big countries are highly complex. And there are areas where we agree, and there are areas where we disagree. And the important thing, I think, in effective diplomacy is, if there are 5 things we agree about and 2 or 3 things that we disagree about, is to not let those 2 or 3 things escalate into something where we are no longer able to even talk about it. So there are an enormous number of commercial and economic ties between the United States and China. We make very good progress in that field, but we do have fundamentally different views about the freedom of expression. And so it's important to voice those concerns, but do so in a way that doesn't completely destroy the rest of the relationship. As to your second question regarding Barack Obama and Twitter, he actually has 2 Twitter accounts. One could say he has 2 Twitter accounts. They do what 10 Downing Street does, where one of the principal Twitter accounts is at White House. And so the official White House tweets do come from this White House Twitter account. And the communication there comes from the new media team in the same manner in which in the press room he has somebody standing behind a podium like that and he's speaking on behalf of the administration. His account at Barack Obama is actually his political account. So in the United States, we make a hard legal distinction between those things that are election related and those things that are related to governance. And so White House is for governance and Barack Obama is for campaigning and for things of a more partisan political nature.
Okay, thank you. Thank you to come today. And what is your next destination?
After France, I'm off to Morocco.
Okay.
So I've got about 10 days on the road. Life as a diplomat.
Good luck. Thank you.
Thank you all.